You are listening to Cinema Rex. It is an Iranian film podcast. Episode 24, Saeed Roustayi's Leila's Brothers. Farhan, how are you and what was the biggest fight you've ever had with your family?
I'm good, and I don't know. Put me on the spot. I don't know.
Don't know or don't want to say?
No, don't know. My family drama is thankfully not as intense as a lot of other people's, and I know that is not super common, but yeah.
Wow, you sound privileged. Durud bar shoma dostan aziz. This is the Cinema Rex podcast where we talk all things Iranian film, cinema, television, art, music, culture, fighting within the family, fighting without the family, living a privileged life where you don't have to fight within your family as much as other people have to. When was the last time you told anyone within your family that you love them? Any family member?
My dad, like 10 minutes before the call.
That's adorable. I'm Kaveh Mohebi.
And I'm Farhan Moradi.
That's really good. That's good for you.
When was the last time you told was it your son?
Let me think. I probably told my son this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Solid. Wow, must be nice to have a son. So privileged.
And a daughter.
And a daughter. And a wife. And a dog. And a house.
You can have the dog if you want.
I'll take your dog.
Sometimes I really like having guests, but sometimes it's so much, like, we can just power through some of these without having to introduce someone, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
But sometimes the guest makes the show.
This is true.
I didn't tell you this at the time, but I watched this movie on Friday impromptu with a previous guest of ours.
Mehtash?
I'll give you 3 guesses.
Ruzbe?
I'll give you one more guess. Why aren't you assuming it would be any of the women guests that we've had?
I'm just trying to think of when and where you would have been with
maybe Tara Agdashlu and Tara
would have told me she was in
and
town.
Sadaf and I watched got together and watched this movie.
Sadaf is slammed with Olympics.
Yeah.
Was it one of the female guests?
There's a little tint of jealousy in your voice.
No. It just doesn't make sense that it would be. No, it's not one of the female guests.
I will reveal it at the end of the show. Farhan, why don't you talk about the movie that we watched?
Sure, yeah. So Kaveh texted me, and I'm guessing you had already seen it then. The way that you texted me, you were like, hey, can we watch this other movie instead? Because I want to watch it, and I would love to do it for the podcast.
I said I was watching it tonight.
Right, yeah.
I'm watching it tonight, I said. So I hadn't seen it.
That's true. And it was a movie that was on our list anyway, and we were meaning to watch. It is called Leila's Brothers. Kaveh, what's it called in Persian?
Baradar Leila. No, but that's single brother. How do you say like multiple brother?
Baradar
Baradar Leila.
And then the French name is stupid.
What is it?
I don't like the French name.
Mon Dieu, Leila.
No, it's frère. Very close. Leila et ses frères, which is Leila and her brothers. But that's not the title of the movie.
Shall we do a plot summary?
Yeah, let's do it.
At 40 years old, Leila has spent her whole life taking care of her parents and her 4 brothers. The family argues constantly and is seemingly crushed by debt, caught in a country with a huge economic crisis and inflation as a result of U.S. sanctions on the country. As her brothers are trying to make ends meet, Leila formulates a plan to start a family business that would save them from poverty. Looking for capital to fund the costs of a storefront in a soon-to-be-converted mall bathroom, they are surprised by their father, Ismail. That's my
middle name.
Oh, there we go. Maybe he was inspired by you. Who, in his ambition to become family patriarch, wants to gift 40 gold coins at a wedding, while he cares nothing about the ambitions of his adult children. However, Leila, in cahoots with her 3 other brothers, tricks one of their brothers, Ali Reza, who is supposed to present the coins on behalf of his father by giving him an empty box. Ismail is crowned patriarch just to be demoted, humiliated, and replaced by a rival once the box is revealed to be empty. Leila and her brothers spend the money on a business storefront, but Ismail claims he took out a mortgage to buy the coins, and the family will be homeless if he doesn't get back the money. Fearing for the roof over their head, Ali Reza incites his brothers against Leila's plans in this push and pull cat and mouse fight for the economic future and sanctity of their family, amidst the backdrop of crippling inflation. Wrong move after wrong move, false promises, and bad advice brings the family ever closer to financial ruin and desperate for a way out of their economic stranglehold. It has a Rotten Tomato score of 86%, but an audience score of 100%. Look at that. Flawless. Flawless. So, with that, I ask you, Farhan, what did you think of Leila's Brothers?
I liked it a lot. I know I mentioned that we don't really have a lot of heated fights and stuff in my family. Like, nothing of note that I can recall the last time I had a big one. But the overall like tensions and relationships and dynamics between the family, some of the little idiosyncrasies, some of the things that happen, there were definitely things that I could either identify with myself and my family or with other people that I know. Obviously, it's a movie, so it's going to like push things to kind of dramatic extents. Like it'll take a line or it'll take one point of conflict and it'll see it through to its conclusion. Whereas a lot of times, in my family at least, we can find resolutions pretty early on. It was really entertaining to see it unfold on the screen. And I think that the way it was done was super satisfying to see, if that makes sense. Because it was like, it's not like there's this like crazy outside force that's manipulating their life. The scenarios and the conflict in the film is something that I think a lot of Iranians especially will be able to identify with. Or a lot of people from cultures where it's you're trying to balance the logical decision that'll help your life and your immediate life versus the expectations of cultural duty and honor and saving face.
I think it's interesting that you described it like, obviously because it's a movie, it takes things to like a certain dramatic height. But I would say, speaking from experience and knowing just other families I've talked to, there are moments in this film that I felt resonate so true with some of the arguments I've had, some of the worst arguments I've ever had within my own family, with both my parents or other family members, aunts and uncles, to the point of, not to the extent of physical abuse, which actually happens at some point.
That's the part that I was talking about.
But on the verbal level of screaming and arguing, saying inappropriate things, and literally being like, having this fight, being like, this argument, whoever ends up on the top of this argument will determine the future of the course of our lives. We're deciding something pretty important. And I've been in that situation. I thought some of the most powerful, the fight scenes were the most powerful in my opinion. Just in terms of how much it resonates. The other thing I thought of was, I actually thought about you at one point because I felt one of the strengths, I think there's three major strengths of this film. The performances are, for the most part, like knockout of the park. Honestly, like to some level, Oscar-winning performances.
Yeah, and it's consistently down the board. Like everyone is incredible.
Everyone. Then I thought the blocking, I thought of you because there's a moment when they're all arguing the first time, when they first discover that the dad has this money.
Yes.
And he's just pouring his tea and walking from room to room because he wants to avoid this argument.
Yeah.
And the argument is happening from room to room, and all four brothers and Leila and the mom are like following him saying, what do you mean you have this money? Where are you going? And he's like, he goes up the stairs and it's like, and they're like, so-and-so, your cousin was dumb. Then he's like, but then I'm as dumb as, and like,
he's like, I'm twice as dumb. Yeah.
Yeah. And that to me was like very naturalistic in blocking in terms of like,
yes.
Like whenever I feel like you have those criticisms, like it feels too staged or theatrical. This felt the complete opposite of most naturalistic blocking, which I think was the strength.
100%.
The third strength I think to this was the script, albeit with the caveat that me and the person I watched it with both agreed it was probably half an hour too long. I think this film is still excellent. And the funny thing was I did not know what the runtime was going to be. And when I was watching, I never saw the cursor of where we're at in the film. So like there were times I thought the movie was going to end now.
Yeah, the pacing was 40
weird. More minutes.
Yeah.
And I actually think the third act, like the last 40 minutes are the best parts of the film. Really strong. So I thought it was a lot of which is rare because it's usually not the first act that like drags, but I thought a lot of the first act dragged a bit. If I were to play the editing hand, I'd be like, can we lose something in the first two acts? But those are my things. The acting, the blocking, which is the directing, and the screenwriting, which is pretty much everything you need in film. But I just think those were really like the things that really set it apart from a lot of other contemporary Iranian films.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point of the blocking, I took note of that while I was watching it, that this movie had excellent blocking. Even there's a scene where the one son who actually has his own family, they're at home, the baby was just born, and they're having like a 0th birthday with like a 0 candle on the cake and everything.
Yeah.
And the dad's like, oh, what did you name him? And they're like, we named him after the old patriarch of your family who passed away.
Gholam.
Like, you named him Gholam? He's like, yeah, we named him Gholam or whatever. He's like, okay, show me the birth certificate. And the dad can't read.
Yeah, he's illiterate.
During that scene, as they're going through all the beats of getting the birth certificate, then he goes to the other son and he's like, give me my driver's license. He goes into the other room, he's verifying them, et cetera, et cetera. the way that he moves from person to person and place to place, and the mom takes note of this. She leaves because she's like, oh, I know where this is headed. She leaves. And then the other kids come over. The forethought into the blocking there, I thought was excellent.
Well, and he also ends up comparing, he confirms his suspicions by comparing
the shapes.
Not knowing how to spell the shapes and the scribbles, which is funny because even if you're like a non-Iranian, you can still catch that moment without subtitles because you see him tracing the outline of the shapes and seeing that the shapes don't match the other shapes. So he's like, you've lied. Yeah, it's really clever stuff like that. The other thing, just to add to that, I want to say that the actor who played the father was phenomenal.
Oh, he's so good.
Such a good actor. The opening shot, Kaveh's opening shot corner, me and the person I watched this with, we both really were like, wow, at the first shot. And we both agreed that it almost felt like a painting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this idea, remember that painting that I had you've helped me find from And Life and Nothing More?
Yeah.
It kind of had that vibe of that kind of painting.
Yeah,
like not a Renaissance painting, but almost like a contemporary painting of an old Iranian man sitting at a table having a cigarette. And I was like, this is like a beautiful shot for an opening thing.
It looked a lot like The Godfather in some ways.
A lot of the film has that vibe.
Yes,
without the gangster aspects.
Yeah. It's like The Godfather minus killing.
Totally, yeah.
But in Iran, and they're poor.
The actor, the guy who plays the father is Saeed Roustayi.
Yeah.
And he gave me like his eyes too, gave me real Ian McKellen vibes.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of like pathos and weight and emotional heart. He has sad eyes in the way that Ian McKellen does when he's playing like some of his most heartbreaking characters.
I actually had that same thought at one point. It's funny you said Ian McKellen because I had the exact same thought.
Yeah, you kind of feel his vibes. The other thing I was gonna say was really good character. Like if I had some nitpicks that were about the length of the script, it's like the character development was so three-dimensional and deep that writing, to me, it's like this has to be coming from a real place. This almost feels like this director, like, I don't know if his family was in this situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or if it's like the screenwriter who co-wrote this with the directors, like if this is from a personal family thing, because it's so specific and so nuanced and so much depth behind it.
And it's very believable. Like I've had similar points of conflict come up in my family.
Yeah.
Of like, why don't we do the thing that's just easier for our family and better for our family?
Mm-hmm.
And then the counter argument is, well, we need to be able to save face, and there's the duty and the obligation and like hundreds of years of tradition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like that, I think, is a universal issue with so many people, with so many Iranians, so many Arabs, Japanese culture, same thing.
Yeah.
And I love, so the father has this obsession with becoming the new head of the family, right?
Yeah.
And I find it funny because that obsession, I think, stems from an insecurity.
Oh, of course. 100% though.
He can't even read, right?
Yeah.
And so because of the fact that he can't read, his children will take advantage of that for the sake of keeping the peace, like when they lied to him about the name of the kid, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like as people get older, they kind of start to lose less and less power, or the kids become older and the kids kind of have to assume the responsibility of taking care of the family. And I think for a lot of, especially older men, it becomes a little emasculating to be like, oh, well, you don't think I can take care of myself, whatever. And it's like, well, he can't read. He's at a point where he's having, what's it called? Like para-insomnia or whatever, where he's like sleepwalking. He like pees in the sink, all this stuff. He passes out when he gets too worked up. He's dealing with all these things. And he wants to be the head of the family, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, well, this is my last chance. I'm at the like twilight of my life. And I just thought that dichotomy of seeing this guy who's like, he's weak, he's frail, people are constantly tricking him.
Yeah.
He doesn't trust when the doctors are like, yeah, it's a boy. Like he's so fixated on being the boss that he needs to be the one to proclaim it's a boy.
Yeah.
Like it's not enough to him for other people to tell him what's going on around him. He needs to be the one in the driver's seat.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is, like, you're hitting upon, but I think that the word you're kind of dancing around, in its singularity, is legacy. This guy's like obsessed with his legacy and hasn't really done much to achieve anything. So for him, this is the opportunity. Like, it's so fascinating from a character point. You meet this guy off the top. I thought this guy was a complete asshole and a monster, because he has to know it's a boy. He has to see with his own eyes that it's a boy. He's forcing his family. You have to name it this guy. And he's like, he's screaming at his own daughter in the hospital. Like, they build up this like really negative dude, like he's a bit of the asshole in the family.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, at one point they slowly start whittling like the humanity and the empathy behind this guy, because you start hearing the stories about how he never fit in with those cousins.
Yeah.
He was the poor one. I'm just going to do a quick quote because it's not my favorite quote, but when they say, "Did you know dad never went to the sea?" And they're like, "No, he went fishing with Golam." He's like, "A pack of lies. They never took him. When you can't feed your family, you don't go on weekend getaways." He makes up memories with his cousins to prove that they love him. For that bastard Bayram's wedding day, he dry cleaned his suit a month in advance. He checked the mail every day for the invite. It never came. He never went, but he's shared 1,000 memories of that wedding. He even says, I was there, and uses me as a witness. Like, that's so sad.
Yeah. He even does
That
it
breaks
in the
my
movie
heart.
with a scene that we see. At the beginning of the film,
Yes,
he's
exactly.
there's these super old school traditions of when you're in mourning, you wear black. And if you're like a high enough station, or you're the child of the patriarch or the head of the family or whatever, other people won't stop wearing black until you stop wearing black. When the eldest cousin of the family dies, his son finally agrees, okay, fine, I won't wear black.
Or shave.
Yeah. So everyone's got big beards. Layla's dad goes and he trims his beard by himself in the bathroom. And then when he comes out, everyone's already switched to white and he's still wearing black. So he's the last one to change.
And his rival closes the door on him too.
Yeah. It was full of
Godfather.
Yeah. It was straight up a shot from The Godfather, where it shows that his rival in the family, the next oldest after him, who's one of his richer cousins, everyone's shaking his hand and kissing his cheeks and all this stuff, and like giving him the blessings, assuming that that guy's going to be the new patriarch or the new head of the family. And he's like left out. He's like, oh, once again, he's been left out. They closed the door on him. He's wearing black. Everyone else is wearing white. And it really shows he is that black sheep of the family, right?
Yeah.
And then later in the movie, when he's talking about how there's duty and honor and expectation for him to become the patriarch, he's just projecting all this stuff onto himself, because he even says, I was the first one to shave my beard. I was the first one to change into white. I was the first one to do all this stuff. But we as an audience literally saw that scene at the beginning of the movie, and none of that happened.
Yeah, like you get the sense he's always been doing this his whole life with this family. It's just he's not included, but then lies enough to himself that he even starts to believe it himself.
Yeah.
And that's what made me like my heart break for this character that I don't like. Like, it's an unlikable character, and yet you feel for him.
Yeah.
The other thing to that was the son of the patriarch who's died says, my father has mentioned in his will who is going to take his place, and that's a big deal. And then he tells the guy we've been watching this whole time, the old man, that he's picked you, even though we never see it. It's left to be kind of like dubious as to whether or not this guy's just like, you know what I mean? Like, the whole thing is like, we're going to make you the patriarch, but at my son's wedding, you have to give 40 gold, or you have to give money, because that's what the patriarch does. You have to give lots and lots of money.
Yeah.
That's what's inspiring him to be this guy that's going to give 40 gold coins at the wedding, because everyone after him would have to give less and less.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating thing. Like, it's just because on one hand, you see it from Layla's point of view. She's absolutely right. This money could be used to better their own lives.
Yeah.
And as a father, you have a responsibility to take care of your kids.
Yeah.
To what extent, I don't know. Like, maybe when you're 80 or 90 at that age, they should be taking care of themselves. But it's left understood that he probably hasn't been a father that's been very supportive of his kids in any manner. But at the same time, you know, how can you argue with a lot of people from that generation, any kind of culture really, that legacy matters? How you're remembered matters. Should he not feel justified in feeling like, I want to be remembered in a certain way when I die?
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't that have value to someone? And it does. You know, so there are interesting aspects from both sides. I think ultimately I land on the side that money should go to the family, and I think most people do. But I can't totally balk at the idea that this guy cares about how he's remembered when he dies. He specifically talks to his wife about, when I die, on my gravestone, it will say,
Esmail, head of the Jurablu family.
On his gravestone. And then it says, and to his wife, he's like, and for you, it'll say, wife of the head of the family.
Well,
like,
okay, I took issue with this, and I take issue with a lot of the subtitles in this movie. He doesn't say wife, which is Zan. He says Hamsar.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And Hamsar doesn't just mean wife, like it means partner. It means like the person who's with me. It literally means co-head. So like you're both the heads together. That's why I took issue with it, because it's still a patriarchy, but it's robbing that moment of some of the irony in the wordplay. Yeah. When he says that he's the head of a family and then he says, "Oh, and you're the co-head," is I think kind of robbing that moment. Okay, I have a couple little things that I just pointed out here that I like. The dynamics between the siblings, I think, was excellent. Like the way that they're like teasing each other, but then they're also very loving towards each other. I found it interesting how Ali Reza, the most responsible brother, as a character, his whole mantra is don't get involved in other people's lives, right? And then the father, his mantra is essentially duty and saving face above all. Like, I will sacrifice my entire family for the sake of duty and saving face to the rest of the family. Yeah. He doesn't just see this as, those are my kids, this is my wife. He's not seeing them as their own separate entities. He's seeing them as either satellites to himself, or he's seeing them as like parts of who he is. Yeah. And he's like, you're all a part of me. Yeah. And I'm the head. And if I want to sacrifice my arms and legs to help my family, and he's saying family as in like his cousins, then that's what he has to do. But the rest of his family is like, bro, don't look at us as extensions of you. Look at us as your family. You keep talking about how you want to be the head of this family. You want to be the head of the family of your cousins, et cetera, et cetera. You have an opportunity here to set our lives in motion in a way where you can be the head of our own family. And then you have Leila's philosophy, which is screw everybody else. Family is absolutely important, but we need to have each other's backs in our immediate family. So one is everyone take care of yourself. Don't get involved in other people's stuff. One is screw the family. We need to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of the greater family. And then the other person is, I don't care about anybody outside of us. I don't care about us as individuals. I care about our immediate family. And I think seeing those three philosophies collide is the root of why I love this movie so much. Yeah. Yeah, it ultimately is coming down to, because if you chalk up Ali Reza's stance as apathy, then it comes down to the idea of like legacy from the parent, from the father, or the sanctity that comes from Leila. It's like the sanctity of protecting this family and supporting one another. And one quick thing to what you said, the filmmakers make a point to show how sometimes any of them are right and sometimes any of them are wrong. Like to Ali Reza's point, when they do get too involved in his dad's life and he's like, he's an old man, he's sick, just let him do his thing. And then when he gets convinced to get involved, his dad gets so worked up that he passes out. Yeah. I also really like the line he says, where like one of the reasons Ali Reza says, I don't know if this is a good idea. He goes, you know what I'm afraid of? And don't take this badly. I'm afraid that if we give the 40 coins, they'll say the coins were theirs. And everyone will believe them. You know why? Because we don't look like we can give 40 coins or $50 million. We're just too poor. Yeah. And that's also like, just like they're stuck in their status. Yeah. You know? Yeah. Even if they gave this money, someone could just take it from them and be like, they didn't give this money. That was such a good point from him too. And I was like, wow, this guy is so perceptive. Yeah. And he's so self-aware that he's able to make that point. And I think that's why he's the most successful of the brothers. Yeah. Because he's very smart. He's very bright. Even though he's not educated, he's very astute. And I think Leila is also extremely astute. And I would say Leila is even smarter and more... yeah, she's the smartest person. More strategically savvy than the brother. Yeah. The issue is, the quote-unquote issue, Leila's a woman. Well, yes. So you have this whole thing where, you have this whole movie is talking about becoming the patriarch, becoming the head of the family, all this stuff. Leila is literally the prime leader in this family. Yeah. And the only reason that she's not leading, and the only reason that like her dad isn't taking her advice, most likely, is the fact that she's a woman. Not just her dad. I mean, for the most part, this is House of the Dragon, essentially. Even her mom. This is House of the Dragon adapted into an Iranian household. Yeah. It is the idea of, I mean, I wanted to go into it more into deep analysis, but they aren't listening to the one woman who's making all the right decisions. Okay, last two things that I that kind of stood out to me that I liked in the movie. One was there's a scene where Ali Reza sees Mariam, his ex-girlfriend from way back in the day. And now she's gotten married. She has a kid. She has her own life. there's like no dialogue.
Mhm.
They see each other from across the street and they basically mouth the word hello to each other. And then they do not break eye contact as they're slowly closing the door. And the camera just pushes in more and more on each of their eyes.
Mhm.
And it's such an intimate and intense scene.
Yeah.
And it was done so well. And it's such a simple little scene.
Yeah.
It was just, I thought, masterful filmmaking. And then when Manucher, the like European inspired like metrosexual brother with the ponytail,
Right, yeah.
when he's leaving in the airport, they all like wave goodbye and they're all sad and stuff.
Yeah.
And then just before he turns the corner, he does a little dance. And then
I love that scene.
Yeah. And then they all start laughing and they get goofy. And then they're like, okay, just go, go, go. He's like, okay, bye. And then he waves. And then right then it like the camera like punches back and you're in a wider shot. And you notice that corner that he went around is just like essentially a pillar with a plant in it. And then he comes out the other side and he starts dancing again. And then they all start laughing at him.
Yeah.
It like happens like twice as he keeps like poking out from behind these little barriers. And I thought it was really funny.
I teared up during that scene because of how sad it was and how much it was important for him to make sure his siblings still laugh.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it was like a very emotional scene.
Yeah. And it comes back to that thing of saving face. He's saving face in front of his siblings for the sake of their happiness.
Yeah.
And then even at the end of the movie, when the dad dies, Ali Reza doesn't make a big fuss of it because there's all these kids here.
Yeah.
And again, he's trying to save face
Yeah.
for the sake of the people around him, for the sake of the greater family, right?
Yeah.
It's just that thing that, like, is Ali Reza now destined to save face like his father?
The death scene, I think, is really interesting because it's coincidental that everyone just happens to be laughing, singing, dancing, and celebrating while he's dead in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're singing happy birthday and no one knows. But from the directing standpoint and from the writing standpoint, they might as well be singing on his grave.
Mm.
They're dancing and celebrating around his dead body as if like, hurrah, thank God he's dead. Like, obviously they're not doing that because they don't know. But to have him dead in that room and the vibes in the room are joyous and celebratory and happy says a lot. Like, that's a final statement, eh?
Mm-hmm.
That it's like everyone's singing and dancing while he's dead in the room. I thought that was like a really interesting sort of like proverbial nail in the coffin for the statement about his thing. The things about the brother too I want to add was I actually thought for the longest time that muscle brother, the muscular one, was a little bit of a waste of a character until he had two moments that floored me. Is when he cries. Remember when he like gives him the passport and says, go and leave it. And you know what? Don't call that often either. Yeah. And if you do call, just tell us you're happy and everything. And like, I thought that was a really emotional moment.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Like all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, this actor like knocked it out of the park. And also when Leila has that big, I thought the whole final fight when all the brothers are in the room and Leila's telling her parents off. Yeah. Like really viciously, and it ends with her slapping her father, and that muscular brother's like, "What have you done, Leila? What are you doing? What have you done?" And he's like, "I'll kill." Remember, like he loses his shit, and the other brother. Yeah. I thought that was like those were like really powerful. Like
he goes into roid rage.
Yeah, yeah, he does too much like protein and roids at the time.
Yeah, he has a few moments of roid rage.
Yeah. When the father faints in the mall. Remember?
Yeah.
No, who was it? Yes, and the father faints. I actually think it's also really. We should note that. It was kind of good that at no point does the father die of a heart attack or something. Cause there's like, he falls down the stairs. Yeah. Right. And he faints. But like, there was never a scene of like him, like having they always kind of infer that like all this stress is going to give him a heart attack. And don't you kind of feel like it's going to happen?
Yeah. Well, and he has a pacemaker and there's a little bit of foreshadowing. Yeah. Which you don't really catch until you finish the movie. But there's a scene where the father has fallen asleep on the sofa. Yeah. And the mom's like, yeah, he just got his new pacemaker. Go listen. You can listen to it if you get up to him. And so he goes over and he puts his ear. Ali Reza puts his ear up against his father's chest and he hears the pacemaker. Then at the end of the movie, when the father dies, he goes and he puts his ear up to his chest and he doesn't hear anything.
I also think this is the most contemporary movie because Trump is the president and it's in the background of the scenes. And Trump's decisions has a major impact on how the events of this film take place. Do you remember at one point when they're trying to buy back the gold coins? Trump has left the nuclear deal with Iran. Yeah. And so that's made inflation. That's caused inflation within Iran. And the price has gone down. The price of the Toman has gone down. So now they can only buy for the same amount of money they got for 40 gold coins. They can only get 30 gold coins. And then they come back like the next day and it's like now they can only get 25. And they're like, it was 25 this morning, but then Trump sent a tweet and now it's 20. And then the dad goes,
like, what's a tweet?
What's a tweet? Is it a bomb? And it's like, no, if you had thrown a bomb, it would be better.
Yeah.
It's really like funny that dad thinks the tweet is a bomb.
Yeah.
Because Trump tweeted, all of a sudden these guys' situation got even worse.
Yeah.
Which like really like goes to show you how reckless it is to have a guy like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, whatever. Not getting political, but behind the scenes in trivia. Okay, you want me to get heavy? Two things. I have two major behind the scenes trivia notes.
Hit me.
The Cinema Organization of Iran's Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance expressed dissatisfaction with the film as cast members made remarks critical of the Iranian government at Cannes. Mohammadezadeh kissed his wife Ferishte Hosseini on the red carpet. On the 1st of June 2022, Minister Mohammad Mehdi Ismaili said the film may not be allowed to be released in Iran since it screened at Cannes without the government's approval, which he said was against the law. On the 22nd of June 2022, Ismaili said the organization had officially banned the film. And on the 15th of August, the film's director Saeed Roustayi and his producer Javad Norouzbeghi were both sentenced to 6 months in prison by the Islamic Revolutionary Court in Tehran for screening the film without approval. As part of the sentence, which is served for 9 days, while the rest will be suspended for over 5 years. Saeed Roustayi and Javad Norouzbeghi have to take a 24-hour course about, quote, creating movies aligned with national interests and national morality. So, to sum it up, they were arrested for 6 months for playing this movie at Cannes without their approval, and the movie's been banned in Iran.
That's wild. When I was watching this movie, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Iranian government propped this movie up a ton to be like, oh, look, we're poor because of the sanctions. That's why everyone's in such bad shape. Blah, blah, blah. Like, I thought for sure they would have really tried to use this movie as a propaganda tool. Even if it wasn't meant to be by the filmmakers, I could have seen the Iranian government trying to hijack this and use it to their advantage.
I think you give them too much credit in terms of them having any sense of like.
No, they've done that before.
I know they've done it before, but then there's no track record for it. They're insane. They'll just do what it's like a chicken with its head cut off. They don't know what they're doing.
Oh, I see.
There's no
there's no rhyme.
There's no like straight in there. Yeah, exactly.
One time, another time they might.
Yeah,
not.
it's just like insane. It's insanity over there.
Yeah,
with the government. But yeah, and then so they have to take a 24-hour course about creating movies aligned with national interest. I wonder what those classes were like. You just have to sit there and be like, praise be Allah in all your films. Okay, this is also very heavy, and then this is the end of behind the scenes. The two actors in this film, Saeed Samimi, which plays the father, the old man, and Farhad Aslani, who plays the overweight brother, were both accused of sexually assaulting Katayun Riai, who's an actor who I actually did not see on the IMDb list, so I don't know if this was on another project.
I think it's another film.
And Somaya Mirshamsi, who is the assistant director of this film.
Is she the assistant director of this film or the other film?
Well, she's an assistant. All her IMDb credits are AD. So she might not have been the assistant director of this film.
I heard that it was the assistant director of that other film. But she could also be an assistant director on this. I don't know.
What was the other film? Do you know?
Yeah, I was reading about this today. Hang on, I'll tell you right now.
Both of the charges were laid after the filming of this film.
She had been sexually harassed and violently threatened by Farhad Aslani while working on a film directed by Hatef Ali Mardani. At the time of the incident, Aslani allegedly took her hand and asked Miss Mirshamsi to kiss his face. And then there's a few other ones on here as well. So it would have been a movie by Hatef Ali Mardani. After Aslani was charged by the assistant director,
Somaya Mirshamsi, maybe it was a different assistant director for a different film. It says by the AD. Tarana Ali Dusti, who plays Leila, announced on her Instagram that the rest of the cast won't stand by the accused at the 2022 Cannes Film Festival. Aslani did not go to the festival. After the cast appeared on the red carpet, the famous actress Katayun Riai posted the photo of poor Samimi at Cannes with a red cross on him and mentioning the Iranian page of Me Too movement in her Instagram story. The next day, she posted on Instagram that she had been sexually assaulted by him 25 years ago. Okay, there we go. Found it. So, I thought those actors are really, really talented, but never ends.
Yeah.
This shit.
No, it doesn't.
So, there it goes.
Sexual assault knows no borders.
Well said, Farhan. Sexual assault does not have a passport.
Yeah. We already mentioned this, but just another behind the scenes thing. This movie was made in the wake of the Trump sanctions and tearing up the nuclear deal, et cetera, et cetera. And the movie often has bits and pieces of Trump headlines in the background. Mm-hmm. Aside from the one that directly is mentioned in the script, there are other moments in the film where you see it throughout the background to kind of set that stage for the time period. Mm-hmm. My last one, I don't know if this is 100% true, but I'm convinced that there's a ton of ad lib from two of the characters. Manucher, who's played by Payman Maadi.
Yeah. Who's like probably one of the more famous actors of contemporary stuff because he was in A Separation. He's been in a lot of like Farhadi films recently.
And he's also directed his own films that have played internationally.
Yeah.
And also Farhad Aslani, who plays Parviz. I'm pretty sure those two characters have a lot of ad-lib because all the other characters in the film, the way that they're written, the rhythm to their voices, the words that they're using, how much they're speaking, it's all pretty consistent. And you can tell, okay, this is likely a script, but a very good script. But those other two characters just feel so much like off the cuff riffing a lot of the time that I'm convinced that there's a lot of ad lib from the two of them.
Yeah, I can see that. Should we move to critical reactions?
Yeah, let's do it.
As mentioned, 78% Rotten Tomato by the critics, which is high, and 100% by audience, which is perfect. The film was selected to compete for the Palme d'Or at Cannes. It didn't win, but it was nominated. It won the Fipresci Prize, which I think is just like International Critics Award, and won the Citizenship Prize, which is just another prize. Not much to say on critical reactions, other than it's done well and very acclaimed film. Deeper analysis. We touched on this a bit, but I think my deeper analysis just touches on the fact that this feels like a microcosm of patriarchy. The daughter, Leila, the titular daughter, from step one is the only one making all the right choices. But with every turn, she's excluded, ignored, overlooked, or stepped around. The family consists of mostly men, making all the decisions and making a wrong turn every step of the way. The most shrewd and selfish man is the oldest man, which were representative of the old guard, previous generations. The last generations, the one that was either complicit to the Islamic Revolution, apathetic towards it, or just took their money and ran, leaving a younger generation to fight for scraps. Huh?
That's good.
So you look at this family, and even generationally and gender lines drawn, it's a microcosm for Iran.
Yeah.
And I think it's visible. Like people are keeping money, hoarding money, hiding money, desperate for money.
Yeah.
They're all laid out there. No one's listening to the woman.
And Leila is so astute with her observations and her predictions of things. Just to clarify for the listeners, essentially the setup for this engagement party that's coming up at the end of the movie is that the elder of the family is going to be announced. The head of the family is being announced, like who's succeeding to be the head of the family. That person needs to pay the biggest gift. And how much they pay, it's announced to everybody. How much they pay sets the bar for how much everybody younger and younger and younger or further and further down that the hierarchy pays. So if the first person pays 40, the next person might pay 35, the next person will pay 30. So it goes down as it hits the next person on the rung. And it starts with this first big wedding. Then with each subsequent wedding, the amount that is paid of the amount that you put in is covered by the next person in line after you. And so you're supposed to get like a kickback eventually once you pay into this enough. It's a bit of a risk and a bit of a Ponzi scheme because at any point, if one person pulls out or pays less, you are now left with a massive amount of debt. And they're setting it up so that this guy who's super poor, Ismail, is now the patriarch, despite the fact that all these other people have way more money than him, and they're expecting him to pay the biggest gift. So Leila says, why don't they just give you the money to give back to them so that you can still be the head of the family? They still set the bar really high. There's no insult to anybody. And it's respectful of the fact that you're poor. If they really put you in this position because they respect you and they love you and they think that there's a duty to put you in that position of power, then there should just as much be a love and respect and sense of duty to help you out. And he's like, no, I can't do that, blah, 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 all this stuff. And then Ali Reza says, well, they're probably going to assume that's what happened anyway. Then when they're at the engagement and Ali Reza walks in the room and he sees that the guy whose son is getting married is distributing gold coins and money to everyone, he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm giving money to everybody so that they can actually afford to give the gifts. And he's like, well, I think you're going to need to do that for my dad, and everyone else is going to have to pay for their own gifts or pay a little more for their gifts. And he's like, oh, I can't do that. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, why are you willing to do that for everybody else, but you're not willing to do that for the head of the family?
Yeah.
It's indicative of how you will, even within families, you'll have people who are willing to pull fast ones on each other to get themselves ahead.
Yeah, that whole money thing was very confusing to me, but I just figured that it wasn't integral to the plot. Almost similar to how when they were first talking about the business that they want to start, or the venture they almost get into, that it ends up being that Manucha did get into, the selling of the pre-sale cars.
Oh, yeah.
I remember I spent so much time trying to follow the intricacies of what that plot was going to be because I thought this was what the movie was going to be about.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like...
I made that note.
And then I was like, oh, I don't need to pay attention. Like, whatever. Okay, I realized that very quickly they're not going to stay that. So I kind of did the same thing when it came to this wedding scene with the money. I was like, wait, what's happening? I'm like, I guess it doesn't really matter. Like, the drama is inherently within the family about spending money. You know what I mean? I actually got lost in the machinations of both scams.
Yeah.
So what's your deeper analysis on that, though?
I was mainly talking about how this is an example of how astute Leila is in her forethought, that she can already predict exactly how this is going and offers a solution that the dad refuses, which is a solution that's allowed to the rival.
Right.
It's just like another example of Leila being on the ball and on top of things.
Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to make it clear to the audience what that arrangement was because it's kind of convoluted and it's so specific, like you were saying. Yeah, you mentioned this. The dad is so focused on being the patriarch and the leader, and ironically, Leila is the leader of their family. Mm-hmm. There's all these super common stories within families of these things coming to a head, and I think showing it is definitely an example of like, hey, this is an insight into Iranian life a lot of the time. The one brother keeps saying nobody meddle in each other's lives, and the sister is insistent, no, we're all on this together. That kind of felt a little bit like a East mentality versus West mentality, where like in the West, it's a lot more of like an individualistic philosophy of how do I push forward my own enterprises? Whereas in the East, it's a lot of we all need to make sacrifices for the betterment of everybody else. Okay, I also have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think in the end, despite the fact that the kids were likely correct, and you said that you believe the kids were correct, do you think it was worth it for them to take the coins and sell it and do all this stuff, considering the stress that it put their father through?
I can just tell you that I probably wouldn't have based on my personality.
Right.
I don't know whether or not it was worth it. Like, if I was in a situation where someone else, if I had a sister that was going to do that, I might be looking at it and being like, that's the thing we need to do. It's too, I mean, I don't know. Why? Like, why don't you tell me? Like, I think it's a little too complicated for me to put myself to talk about whether or not the value of something is worth doing.
I just think that that's kind of, for me, a lot of the movie, that's what it boils down to is at what cost are you willing to do one thing or the other? At what cost are you willing to save face and live up the duty of the greater family versus at what cost are you willing to do what is required for the survival of your immediate family? Like when do you pick saving face over the needs of your immediate family? At the end of the film, we see Ali Reza is now saving face in front of these kids.
No, it's not saving face. It's not saving face.
He's saving face for the sake of the comfort of the children.
No. You don't announce in a group of 4 or 5-year-olds celebrating their birthday that there's a dead body in the room. It's not about pride at that point. It might be, it's a certain degree of pride, but it's also like, you don't want to scare a bunch of little girls on the birthday party that someone's dead. It ruins the entire day for them and probably
that's saving face. Scared. You literally just described saving face.
It's trauma. No, I'm saying it traumatizes them. You'd ruin her birthday because you'd be traumatized. The girls would be fucking freaked out.
Yeah, but you're lying for the sake of saving the appearance of happiness. You're saving face. Pride. I didn't say it was pride. I don't think saving face is always about pride.
The face part of it is pride.
Maybe
that's
it's
the face part.
Is it? Maybe it's the face part of the happy face, the smile.
Yeah, it's not.
Maybe I'm using okay, let me reword it. Do you think Ali Reza is destined to put up a front to make other people in the family happy the way that his dad did?
No, because at the end he shouts at the he's changed. He goes to the people that he's striking with and like demands that they get paid at the value. Like he was a guy that was willing to be a little bit of a run away from it and avoid the confrontation.
Yeah.
When they're first striking, when he goes back to the striking people, he yells at them and says, "We demand this money." And they say, "That's all you're gonna get. Take it or leave it." He goes, "Fuck it, I'll leave it." And he walks out and smashes the glass on his way out.
Yeah.
So we see that he's actually changed for the betterment. He's got more of a spine because of the events of this.
Yeah. Cool. I like that a lot.
Best scene. Let me guess. Wedding scene? All of the wedding?
No.
Okay. That's my number one standout scene is the wedding scene. From everything that happens when they're there, I thought was like really edge of your seat. Him arriving, him getting recognized.
Which part?
Well, I like, what do you mean? Which part?
Like,
which part?
Because there's like 6 scenes at the wedding or at the engagement.
Yeah, it's a massive set piece in the movie, but it's all like the scene at the, like, okay, when he realizes the box is empty and the way that the father is being told he has to step down the stage, but you don't hear the dialogue.
Yeah.
All of that, and the way the father's reaction stepping off those stairs and watching the sons as he heads back to the stair, like all of that stuff was just like,
yeah,
it was like cringy, it was nerve-wracking, it was
so
embarrassed, so tense, and I thought that was really beautiful. And then the second one, I won't go into much detail in case it's yours, but it's like, it is Leila finally confronting both parents in front of the family. The dialogue in that was really emotional. Okay, those are my two.
No, that wasn't my other one either.
Great, then go. What are yours?
So my two, one of them is there's a scene where Manucher is like, no, I can't help you guys. I have my own stuff to deal with. And then the youngest brother, the Jim Bro brother, is like, well, fine, then I'm going to take my passport back. If you have all this stuff to deal with, then you don't need my passport. It's not like you'll be traveling. And he's like, no, you don't need your passport back. Manucher uses his passport to get around. He doesn't have his own.
What is that? So what is that about? Manucher uses his brother's passport to travel?
Yeah.
Because they look alike?
Manucher doesn't have a passport. He was probably denied for some reason. Maybe he broke a law. Maybe he didn't do his military service. Like,
how does he use his brother's passport? He doesn't look like his brother.
He put his own photo on his brother's.
Okay, right. You're right. I remember that.
He mentions it. So then they have this whole fight where he's like, where's my passport? And he's like, no, I'm not giving it to you. And he walks out of the room. And then all of a sudden the Jim Bro brother like absolutely loses it. And he like opens up the cabinet, like grabs this thing, starts ripping through all of his stuff, finds this suitcase. He's trying to break the suitcase open, and then Manucher comes out, and all of a sudden, like all the siblings are like dogpiled on top of each other, trying to get at the suitcase. And then finally, like through all the shouting, all the craziness, the suitcase rips open, and snacks go flying everywhere. And everyone's just silent.
What was that?
And looking at these snacks.
Why were there snacks in there?
I don't know. Everyone's just like looking at these snacks and really confused. And the Jim Bro grabs his passport and he walks away. And then everyone's like looking at each other, taking a deep breath. Then all of a sudden, this like elevator slowly comes up.
Yeah, that was funny.
And it's got the business associate just standing there, like looking over everyone, like, what the hell happened? So that one. And then my other favorite scene is when they find out about the dad's gold coins. The one where you mentioned how it had really good blocking, how they're downstairs, they go upstairs. The dad loses it at them, and then the dad passes out down the stairs. That scene was also one of my favorites.
Yeah, that was like probably up there with mine, tied with my second favorite. All those fights, all the family fights, quarrels where every family member is there is really good.
Oh, they're so good.
There was also, just to talk about the elevator, I wanted to put this in deeper analysis and kind of forgot. There was a very interesting juxtaposition between the elevator that he has to ride in his home, and then the very next scene is they're at the mall and the elevator ride they take up to go to their meeting.
Yeah.
It's like a beautiful glass elevator in this like really swanky mall, like stainless steel with like glass, and it's the very next shot, so it's almost side by side. It shows Leila going up the elevator and like straight in the next shot. And it's just like the juxtaposition of the life they're currently living or the life they want, represented through these two elevators. I thought it was very interesting.
But also, I think it's commentary on the life of men and the life of women. Because when they're going to the meeting, Manucher is like, you can't come, you're a woman.
Yeah.
This negotiation is for men to have. When it was Leila's idea to begin with. And they make her stay, and she takes this rickety elevator up to like be by herself at the top of this like poorly built like fake apartment on top of an apartment. Meanwhile, the brothers are riding this like fancy elevator, like you said. I didn't like the opening sequence. So after that first shot, the first shot I really like, but the intercut of the riot at the factory and Leila's massage and the dad at the mosque, like it added a ton of production value to the movie to have that many extras, those big set pieces and all that. But in hindsight, it doesn't really add anything to the movie, and it just makes the runtime too long. What do you think? For
me, it was Leila and Ali Reza on the rooftop.
Oh, I like that scene.
The scene was fine as it was, but it was the one time I really felt the writing of the scene. You know what I mean? Where like there's like a thing where like the camera hates acting. Like Actors are told, don't be seen acting. Make it naturalistic. Don't make it look like you're doing acting, right?
Right.
There's the same for writing, too. It's like a film that's so laden with all these like really naturalistic fights and performances. And then they go upstairs for a cigarette. And this was the moment where the blocking might have done an injustice to the writing. Was he kind of smokes and he goes out to the rooftop and the shot is of him on his back looking out the window. And he's like, I've learned that growing up means slowly but surely giving up on what you want. That was the line. And then after it goes, all the rich people know each other. You see it at work. People don't know each other. And I was just like, this feels like here's the monologue scene.
Right.
It just took me a bit out of it. So that was just for me, least favorite. Damn, that's poetry. Favorite quote. I don't think I have the same as you. It's after that whole thing that I spoke earlier when it was the story that the brother says about how he was never invited to go fishing.
Yeah.
And he always pretended he did. And you learn all that sad stuff. Leila talks about who knows if there's even a will, she essentially says. And she goes, if there isn't a will, none of this even matters. And she goes, if there is a will, it means we're letting a dead man dictate our lives.
من که میگم اصلا وصیت‌نامه‌ای در کار نیست. ولی اگرم باشه این یعنی اینکه ما داریم اجازه میدیم یه مرده واسه زندگی ما تصمیم بگیره.
Right.
That to me I thought was such a great line because that again going to deeper analysis just feels like how many dead imams are there, like radical right-wing imams, extremist imams who made decisions in the late 70s, early 80s who are dead now, who still their actions reverberate throughout the country.
Yeah.
All these dead like awful human beings within Iran that like established a government that is currently in power.
Yeah.
Who are dead and gone, and yet they dictate their lives. Not that I think every line has to be going back to that, but it made me think of that we let a dead man dictate our lives.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really powerful line. So that's my favorite.
No, that's really good. It's funny that you didn't like that monologue in your least favorite scene because I actually really liked it.
I knew there was going to be a chance you would have. I wrote it down. I was like, this might be Farhan's favorite scene.
It wasn't my favorite scene, and it wasn't my favorite line either, but I did definitely really like that. I thought that was interesting when they're like, why do you think rich people all know each other? It's because there's so few of them.
I like that line.
Poor people, we don't know each other, but we recognize each other's faces because we're all going through the same thing.
I will just say with what you're saying, I actually like that quote in a vacuum, and I feel like that quote feels better fit for a Kiarostami film.
Yeah.
Whereas with all the naturalistic moments in this, that took me out of it because it suddenly felt oddly, strangely poetic and scene setting.
Right.
It was the gel with how it just didn't, it was a mismatch for me for all the others.
Yeah. So my favorite quote, it's like a call and response between Ali Reza and Leila when they're on the roof the second time.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I'm disgusted with flawed people and I'm afraid of flawless people. I was afraid of that shop for the same reason. It's because I'm afraid of happiness. And Leila responds, this is what happens when you're taught what to think and not how to think.
من از آدمی که نقص داره بدم میاد از آدمی که بی نقصه میترسم. یعنی چی؟ من از اون مغازه‌ام میترسیدم چون من حتی از خوشبختیم میترسم.
وقتی جایی فکر کردن چه جوری فکر کردن یادت میدن همین میشه دیگه.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's very good. Favorite performance? Taraneh Ali Roustayi, it gets the award for me because she's carrying the emotional weight of a lot of this, but I also want to give a runner-up to Saeed Roustayi because, man, that guy, the person I was watching this with told me that a lot of those actors are really recognized in old Iranian like film and television.
Mm-hmm.
Saeed Roustayi being one of them is like a very recognizable household name.
Yeah.
And the other one specifically too is the chubbier brother. What was his name?
Parviz.
Yeah, Parviz, played by Farhad Aslani. So it's the two ones that have had the sexual assault charges that are like quite, and I mean, comes with the territory, I guess.
They often work on the same movies together too, those two.
Yeah.
I have the same ones.
So Leila and the father.
Yeah, I agree. I have the same ones. And there was one scene in particular with Taraneh where she's telling the brother what's been happening with the family while he's been gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then she starts to ask him about his life.
Mm-hmm.
And tears just start flowing from her face.
Yeah.
Before you can tell from her voice that she's crying.
Yeah.
You see her eyes tear up and like you see the tears come from her face. And she's not doing that thing where she's acting like she's crying
No.
to accentuate the tears. She's like trying to fight crying. She's trying to like act normal, but the tears are clearly flowing from her eyes.
Yeah.
And then she gets more and more emotional. And she does it a number of times. And I think that this should be a reference for so many actors out there when they're doing these emotional scenes.
Yeah, I was saying to the person I was watching this with, I said, man, she's like the queen of the single tear while talking, because she was getting that single tear happening quite often, like in different moments in the film, and it was really powerful.
Yeah.
My only nitpick, hot take, and what aged poorly is I thought the script is beautiful. I think you can shave off 10 minutes in the first act and 12 minutes in the second act and have like 25-minute less runtime.
Right. Yeah.
So that's it. That's my major nitpick. It's a little too long.
I have a few nitpicks and then I have a hot take.
Shoot.
Technical nitpicks. The sound mix is weird sometimes, like with the dialogue. Sometimes people sounded a little too mumbly, and it was like hard to hear what people were saying just because they were so mumbly. The camera work in two of the scenes felt a little like kind of bumped me. One of them is when Ali Reza is running after Leila in the street at night. The camera work is kind of shoddy there. And I suspect it's because they had to use the street lights and they were probably getting flicker. So they had to like change the camera settings to something weird. But because of that, it like didn't, like it felt weird. It felt kind of soap opera-y. And then the scene where Manacher is puking in the street, the camera work was kind of bumpy there. That was weird. Performance-wise, there's two parts that bumped me. When Leila slaps her father, the slap did not look good. Like that looked like a bad slap.
Okay.
And I wonder if it's the actor felt bad slapping this old man. You could have fixed it. Like if they just sped it up a tiny bit in post and like added a bigger sound, I think it would have been fine. But it looked like she was like about to slap him, and then last second she like slowed down and like tapped his face. And then when the dad died, in a couple of the shots, you can see that his eyes are like twitching and he's like swallowing and all that. And obviously we found out the pacemaker would have continued to work after he died.
Yeah.
And then my hot take, and this kind of ties into what you were saying, I think I would have been much more forgiving to the weird pacing throughout the film if the film took place over a longer period of time. So if we had like time jumps, similar to The Godfather, which this movie I think draws a lot of inspiration from. The Godfather is able to hit all these different points in their lives and not necessarily follow a traditional 3-act structure in its pacing because it has these time jumps. And the time jumps kind of help reset things a little bit. And it almost feels like a mini series in a way when you do it like that. But having the pacing like this and just having it kind of happen one scene after the other, I think it bumped me. But I think if there were time jumps, it would have solved that problem for me. What do you think about that?
That's not a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. Usually a long runtime like that is required because your script takes place over such a long span of time. But yeah, with this taking place over a matter of days, it just felt maybe at times a bit overwritten.
Yeah. If you were the producer and you were like, we need to shave off 30 minutes, where are you shaving it off?
The first and second act.
Like specifically, like what are you shaving off?
I think a lot of the setup with like the that whole scene, I guess maybe with like them potentially doing that pre-sale car thing. There's just another way to explain that Manager is in financial, because it ends up being like Manager had gotten into that thing, and now is like in financial ruin and potential criminal trouble. There's other ways you could have gotten around that without like a 12-minute expository scene.
Yeah, if he had just been involved in some kind of like criminal arrangement with someone. Or you know what? What if he had to like pay for his bail or something? Yeah. And that's why he's out of money and why he can't get a passport.
Yeah.
And he like owes somebody bail money.
Double feature lineup.
Can you guess what mine is?
No.
The Godfather.
Oh, right. Of course. I thought about that at one point.
Yeah, because there's already so many parallels, even just the way that things are shot, the way that the story is formatted, that it feels like a very obvious parallel. And the difference between here's a glorified version of a story about heads of the family and tradition and duty, as well as family honor and all this stuff. And then here's a version that's much more grounded in reality, and it shows the ugly side of things that's much more realistic and without the shooting and all that stuff and the killing.
Yeah.
It'd be a long night though. Tell you that.
Very long. I like this. I call this double feature that I've set up called Strongest Woman in a Sea of Men. Going by Leila being the clear clear and above cut leader of this group she herself is strong-willed and willing to make the tough choices, but she is living in a patriarchal society that tries to rob her of her agency. And all of them are worst for it. For these reasons, I would pair up this film, and brace yourself, with Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, wow. That's really good.
Yeah, because when you have Charlize Theron, I knew you'd like it, and you listeners, because Charlize Theron, her development throughout that story, which for those of you who haven't seen it, I won't go into it, but Mad Max Fury Road does just that thing of having like the clear and above leader of this like society of men, essentially being a woman who is essentially they're trying to rob her of her agency and her taking control like that. So very different movies, even more so than Godfather in this. But I think if you called your double feature Strongest Woman, Sea of Men, Leila's Brothers, Mad Max Fury Road.
Solid.
Thank you. Can this be a modern Hollywood remake? I said no.
Yeah.
Too idiosyncratic in Iranian culture, too recent. It already feels essentially like like a Hollywood film.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a producer, I wouldn't make any real changes. Like, there's no point in putting like Sylvester Stallone as one of the brothers. So no.
Yeah, I agree.
And then to top it all off, final thoughts and grades. I give it a B. I think it's a very good film. I don't think it's even in the A echelon. The things that work really well for me, but I do think that the runtime, and I think runtime is everything in your film, really hinders it from being a super film. It's a very good film, but I don't know if it needed to be nearly 3 hours long. Like, we're really close to 3 hours on the runtime.
Yeah.
It's not the epic that Godfather is. It's a simple but very universal family story about members of a family struggling with money.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know if it justifies a 3 hour runtime. I give it a B. Farn.
I'm giving it, I'm like stuck between two grades.
F and A plus?
Yeah, imagine. I'm stuck between an A- and an A.
Mm-hmm.
It tackles the three sides of caring for yourself and individuals versus caring for your family versus caring for the greater family.
Mhm.
Even if in the case of this movie, it's for the sake of this guy's pride as opposed to like genuine duty to and responsibility to greater family.
Mhm.
It tackles this so well. And it's such an, like you said, idiosyncratic cultural thing that is specific to a lot of Eastern cultures. It does it so well, and I've never seen another movie do this before, where it's like, this is the central conflict of the film. It's not like this is happening on top of some other big conflict. You know what I mean? Lots of other movies that we've reviewed will touch on these idiosyncrasies of culture. This movie, like, this is the reason for the conflict, and it's done so well, and I was so engaged, and the acting was incredible across the board. The production value was great. It genuinely felt like a Hollywood movie because of how well it was shot. And this is why I was shocked that it got banned in Iran. Because I was like, for sure, this movie had to have been made with what's it called? I also just figured out who the guest was. That's why I got sidetracked. I figured out who you watched this with.
Who'd you watch? Who do I
You
watch
watched it with your cousin.
Which no. Oh, Maury. No.
Anyway, all this to say, I really like this movie. I'm gonna give it, you know what? I'm gonna give it an A. And I think the blocking is understated how good it is. It's very complicated to have blocking that good with that many characters. And to not miss a beat and to not miss a reaction, and everyone is in a logical place, and it tees their positioning and their placement and their interactions up from character to character. It's great. A. So that means
A and B. So average score is A minus.
it means that our average score for this film is an A minus minus.
The person I watched the film with was your sister. She had no, I'm just kidding. It was Mertash.
You said no as soon as I guessed.
I think I just moved on. I said, what's your next guess?
Oh, maybe.
Because we thought this is a corollary for the film that we're making this year, and it kind of is. So we had to watch it as like part of our prep.
Find a place to steal some ideas, right?
Yeah, I'm stealing a line from this actually.
Imagine you get sued for plagiarism and you're like, we didn't plagiarize this movie. They're like, Your Honor, in the Cinema Rex podcast at the hour 25-minute mark, Kava says, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but at least we get the listeners. Think of how many more listeners. We get at least 12 from the jury.
That's true.
Leila's Brothers, a kitchen sink drama whose dilemmas of these very ordinary people play out in a beautifully modulated series of mistakes and missteps, always stopping short of a final crisis or dramatic climax, promising resolution. The film is a fascinating family saga that explores the complex relationships between parents, children, and siblings, and the fight against a patriarchal society, and it's undeniable that the portrayal of sibling love and support is heartwarming. The true star of Leila's Brothers is the outstanding performances of an ensemble cast and rich screenplay brimming with humanity, depth, and humor that makes for a genuinely emotional portrait of an imperfect family, even if it walks the fine line of being a typical melodrama. With films like Leila's Brothers, we are ushered in a new generation of Iranian storytellers that are picking up the pieces of a shattered generation to tell all too human and personal stories from the heart. And Farhan, before we go, one last thing. Why don't you tell our audiences about our live event?
For our LA, OC, and SoCal listeners, Kava and I will be live and in person Thursday, August 29th at 7 p.m. at Los Feliz 3, where we were invited by the American Cinematheque to present our pick for the Friend of Fest program. We are super excited to announce the West Coast premiere of the remaster for Bahram Beyzai's 1974 classic, The Stranger and the Fog. Tickets are on sale at the American Cinematheque website now. The event is supported by the Farhang Foundation, so once they post on social media, expect those tickets to sell out pretty much immediately. Again, that is The Stranger and the Fog on Thursday, August 29th at 7 p.m. at Los Feliz 3. Buy your tickets at americancinematheque.com.
Yes. So either be there or don't be there, I guess. Farhan, thank you very much for discussing Leila's Brothers with me.
Thank you, Kaveh.
You know how I feel about you.
Unfortunately.
To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And Be'omid Didar.
Bye. Music for Cinema Rex was written and performed by Sohail Sadinejad.